What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Cardfight Casual channel, and today, as promised, we'll be going through the Shirayuki deck build from the latest set Vilest Deletor's VBTO4. Now, this is of course a new build that was made available in the latest set, but there are some cards here, of course, excluding the triggers and the starter, which is only found in VBTO2. But besides that, there are just a few more cards in this deck that, if you add them in, will make the deck probably more consistent and a lot better. But as it goes, you can still build the entire Shirayuki deck solely from VBTO4, with the exception of triggers, which you'll just have to buy as singles or separately from your old VBTO2 packs. So right now I'm just going to go through each of the cards. First up, we have, of course, the starter, the simple on-ride draw 1. But moving on to the meat of the deck, we're going through the grade 3s. Now, this deck actually runs quite a few grade 3s, and there are several options that you can choose and take, which will make your deck more interesting to play, or more fun to play. So first up, of course, we're going to run through the Shirayuki itself. So Shirayuki, you run 4 copies of her, and her skill is, here's the OR, the very nice OR art. One of my favorite cards from the original anime, or the original Vanguard series. But her skill is on Vanguard, Rearguard, or Guardian Circle on place. You can Soul Blast 2 and reduce 3 of your opponent's units by 5,000 power. And if this card was on the Vanguard or the Guardian Circle, it reduces by 10,000 instead of 5,000. So what this is the most versatile in terms of attacking and defending. Shirayuki allows you to minus 10,000 power from an attacking opponent, which functions as 3 10k shields if your opponent has 3 attacks. Or it functions as a defensive, that's the defensive function, and it also functions offensively, so you can actually play her on your turn. Soul Blast 2 reduce your opponent to 2k if they're at 12k, and 3k if they're at 13k bases, and then you can swing at them with multiple attacks, and they just have to drop lots of hand to guard. But do keep in mind that Soul Blast is pretty hard to come by in this deck. Not sparse by any means, but Soul Blast 2 is of course a heavy cost, especially if you want to keep on using her ability. What's more, you can actually also go into negatives. So a lot of people don't know this about Vanguard, but if you reduce your opponent's Vanguard, let's say they have 11,000 power and you minus 10, it's a simple calculation, 1k. But if your opponent's at 9,000 power and you reduce their Vanguard by 10k, it actually goes to minus 1. So yes, in Vanguard there are negative numbers. But at the same time, this skill is also especially good against plans like Dimension Police, because of the requirement to hit the power threshold. If not, they don't get that, what do you call it? They don't get the boost, the extra critical with the Yusha. And in Narukami, if you reduce Dragonic Kaiser Vermilion's attack, it's the same as reducing one person's attack, but the entire front row gets a 10k shield in that sense. Her second skill is of course the most important skill that keeps the deck going. It is that if her attack does not hit, that means she swings and the attack does not hit. It also works if your opponent is at 13k base and you're 12k base, it just won't hit. You also get to take a Shirayuki from the drop zone back into your hand. So this is kind of going to be the theme of this whole deck, that attacks don't hit and you get to do something, which makes your opponent want to let their attack hit, but at the same time they have to balance how much damage they want to take. But getting Shirayukis back from the drop very easily also means that you'll be getting a lot of cards for free in that sense whenever attack does not hit. So you're just going to want to keep on getting more Shirayukis in your hand, in your drop zone as early as possible to help filter out the deck as well. So next up, we play 3, and I'm going to reduce this to 2, Murakumo Villain. So Murakumo Villain skill is also another great skill on Vanguard or Rearguard. If his attack does not hit, you can counterblast 1 and search your deck for the same unit, a unit on your field, another unit of the same name from your deck, and add it to your hand. Very good for thinning out the deck, getting more Murakumo Villains, getting more Shirayukis, or getting any of the other pieces you need for the combo. A very important card, and he's just really good for adding cards to your hand and thinning your deck. And he's not too bad of a ride, alternative ride, if you're choosing that. So next up we have Mandala Lord. Now I only play 1 copy, but I'll reduce that to 2. I'll reduce Murakumo to 2 so I can play another copy of Mandala Lord. And Mandala Lord's skill is you can Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1, clone 2 cards on your field. Of course, you do have to choose the cards beforehand, so make sure you have enough copies of that card in your deck when you choose it. And the second skill is that you can send a card from hand to soul to plus 3000 power. Now, Mandala Lord may not seem like a great option because it also uses Soul, but that cloning of 2 cards from the field is really good, and because you're going to have a lot of ways to get Shirayuki back from the drop zone, what you can actually do is have Shirayuki be your first ride, and then have Mandala Lord be your second ride, and then you'll have the ability to Soul Blast him, Soul Blast Shirayuki out, and then get her back the next turn. And so something a lot of people don't realize is how much you'll be riding, because with Shirayuki, if you ride on top of another Shirayuki, you can Soul Blast the Shirayuki out, get the Shirayuki back in your hand, and yes, that's a lot of Shirayukis, and ride her the next turn to get another Excel Circle, in addition to Mandala Lord's Excel Circle. And her second skill, even though it's not ready for the power in this deck, because you don't run a lot of cards with Mandala in their name, adding 1 card from hand to soul, just to fill up and make up the difference from the Soul Blast effect is not actually too bad of an idea, because you will be you'll be needing a lot of soul for Shirayuki's effects to work. Unfortunately, you can only do that on Vanguard, so it's not like you can call Mandala to rearguard and then soul charge, but this is one of the pretty good soul charging cards in the deck. Now here you can run actually 2 copies of Mandala, more copies of Mandala, but instead I've elected to run 2 copies of this card just as kind of a gimmick and to kind of surprise your opponent. So your opponent is going to be at 2k or 3k for a lot of this game because of Shirayuki's skill, and having this surprise attack actually does help pretty often. It's not as consistent as you'd like it to be, but there's a way to send these cards back to the deck, which I'll refer to later, and you might want to play more copies of him if you like being lucky, because it essentially turns every grade 3, or rather this grade 3 in your deck, into an additional attack, which is pretty good. And of course, his skill is that when you drive check him, you have the option to call him to the rear guard and attack with him as well during that turn. So if you have an open Excel Circle, that might be an option for you. Or if you just are early in the game and you drive check him on grade 1 or grade 2, you can still call him to the rear guard and get another free attack. There's also grade 1 that combos with him, which I'll be going over later. So we're going to go through the grade 2. So here we have the new 12k base. I played 4 copies of the 12k base, and he's just a good card because, well, he's a vanilla 12k, no shield, but he does get that extra defensive boost if you're facing up against an opponent that has pretty big numbers, and 12k's to swing. 12k's on any rearguard circle will be able to hit any Protect and Excel clans, so having him is always a pretty good option. But of course, I'm going to recommend that you actually you can actually change this card to Fushimi from VTBTO2, and he becomes a 14k attacker instead of 12, so you do get to hit those Force clans. And the option of hitting a rearguard in the back row is also open to you. Another really good card to run in this place. Wouldn't recommend running both because it does get quite clunky. Next up, we have the second most important card in the deck behind Shirayuki, and she is Gyokatsu Girl. So Gyokatsu Girl's skill is she's actually Shirayuki's Searcher. Unfortunately, her attack only works in the rearguard circles, but whenever her attack does not hit, you can search the top 7 cards of your deck and reveal up to 2 Shirayukis, add 1 to your hand, add 1 to the drop zone, and if you did not reveal any Shirayukis, you can send the rest of the cards back and shuffle, and if you did not reveal any Shirayukis, instead you can soul charge 1. So here's your primary soul charge engine, especially later on in the game when all the Shirayukis are out of the deck. But her skill is really good for setting up 1 in hand, 1 in drop, for you to use to ride Shirayuki and use Shirayuki's skills. And top 7, even though it is kind of a random thing, it's not a whole deck search, top 7 usually has a pretty good chance of searching out. If you have 4 or 3 Shirayukis back in the deck, she usually can search out at least 1 copy. So she's pretty much one of the most important cards, more so because of the pressure. Most people want to let her attack hit so that you don't get the search or the soul charge. But later on in the game, when your opponent's at 4 or 5 damage and they want to guard a bunch of attacks, usually you get one of these off and you do get the extra soul charge to fill up the soul, which is of course one of the most sparse resources in the deck. Last of all, we have Maduro Pyro for the grade 2s. So total, I run 11 grade 2s in total, 10 grade 3s. And his skill is that on rearguard, when you call him, you can discard 1 card from hand and search the top 2 cards of your deck, put 1 to hand and put 1 in drop. Now this is not really good. I kind of wish the other card went back to the bottom of the deck instead of going to the drop, because it's essentially scry the top 2 cards of your deck for one of the things you need, which is really good for getting rid of cards that you don't think are going to be beneficial for the rest of the game, like getting one of these in the drop zone or one of these in the drop zone once they've come out, if you don't want to use them. But at the same time, and it only just occurred to me actually recently, you can drop Shirayuki into the drop zone and get her back fairly easily. Now, it's not something that you always want to do, because you realize that Shirayukis are actually quite precious to have in your hand because they give you that defensive option. But at the same time, if you have a Shirayuki on the field and maybe 2 Shirayukis in hand, or if you're confident that you can get the Shirayuki back right away, he basically gives you a free card. Yes, a free card from the top of your deck in exchange for something that you were going to get back anyway. And we're going to be going on to the grade 1s. Now, the grade 1s in this deck are pretty self-explanatory. Because they fit entirely with the theme, and that's probably exactly the way that was meant to be run. So along with Jokatsu Girl, here is the primary support card for Shirayuki builds. Her skill is that once any attack, that's right, any attack, doesn't have to be her attack or the one she's boosting, any attack does not hit, you can send her the soul and take a Shirayuki from the drop zone, or rather up to 1 Shirayuki from the drop zone and add it to your hand. Now, she's the only card that really soul charges herself, and you can send 2 copies of her from the field to the soul and get 1 copy of Shirayuki back because it's up to 1. And that means that she's going to be one of the best cards in the deck to have, because she just gives you everything that you need if you have a Shirayuki and the drop zone. AK booster, nothing much else to talk about, but she combos really well with the next card I'm going to be going through, which is Tsuki Rock. So this guy is probably, along with Shirayuki, the next piece of the combo that you're really going to want to get. So his skill is that whenever an attack, whenever another unit's attack ends, so it doesn't have to not hit or hit, you can counterblast 1 if that opponent, if that unit that you just attacked with is on an additional rearguard circle, basically the Excel circle. You can counterblast 1 and swap his position with that card. So that means if this card is on the rearguard and you have another card on the Excel circle, let me just get an Excel marker here. So if you have an Excel marker here, and let's say this unit just finished attacking, you can actually swap counterblast 1, sorry about that, counterblast 1, swap these 2 units, and attack. And why I said this combo works really well is because if, let's say, her attack did not hit, so you have Rainy Madam, that's her name, swings at your Vanguard, opponent's Vanguard, they guard, you counterblast 1, you swap these 2 cards, and then you send this card to soul and get 1 more Shirayuki from the drop zone. So a very, very well planned out combo. And Tsuki Rock, just if you have just 3 of them or 2 of them on the field, and with all the additional Excel circles, you can get a pretty decent amount of attacks, up to 5 attacks on your first ride, and going forward up to, you know, even 6 or 7 attacks are fairly simple with Tsuki Rock. But do keep in mind that you also want to save your counterblast for Mandala Lord as well as Morita Civilian, so you might want to balance out those counterblasts. But most of the time you want to use it for him because he will give you the advantage in terms of hand size by dwindling your opponent down. And last of all, I play this card. So this is a card that is not really commonly run. So I kind of forgot his name. But his skill is very, very good. When you boost a unit, for example like this, you attack at the end of the battle where he boosted, you can send this card back to the bottom of the deck, and then 2 of your units on the field get plus 5,000 power. Yes, it's 2 units, so you don't get to give 1 unit kind of a 10,000 power boost, but it's especially useful for Tsuki Rock because you can give him 5,000 power so that when he swings at 23 instead of 18, which is really good for hitting force numbers, especially when your opponent's at 3k power base. At the same time, I played this card primarily because I was wanting to run this grade 3 card. So the way he works is that you have to drive check him, so once he's in your hand, he's useless. But with this card, you can send him back to the bottom of the deck, and every time you use Jokatsu Girl's skill, the deck gets shuffled, and then you get to get another chance to drive check him. And ideally, at the end of the deck, the end of the probably 4th or 5th turn, when you're on grade 3s, you want to have only triggers and primarily attacking units in your deck, like that grade 3, which is, his name is something Shadow, Hikari Shadow, something like that. And basically, with more attacks, you can just dwindle down your opponent's hand size and finish up the game. And in addition to those, I'm just going to go through my my trigger lineup because this is quite important. 5 heals, 5 draw PGs, no questions about it. You might want to run more draws, but I do feel that 4 draws is enough. And here is the main debate. You can either play critical triggers or more critical triggers in order for your opponent to be pushed to 5 damage very fast so that you can get very good swings with your rear guards. and they'll have to guard each one. But for me, I mostly play 2 critical triggers as kind of a surprise thing, and I play 6 front triggers instead. So when I was thinking about what to put in this deck in terms of triggers, front triggers were the first thing that came to mind, because in this deck, you're going to have a field that kind of looks something like this. So this is an ideal field. You have maybe an Excel circle here on the early turns. You have a Jukatsu Girl, you have maybe another Jukatsu Girl, one of these, and you have something that looks like this. And maybe you have a Rainy Madam here. Now, if you swing and get a critical trigger, yes, your opponent's going to take 2 damage straight away, and maybe one of your other, like your Jokatsu Girls, will be most likely will be harder to guard, because they have to guard it instead of taking the damage. But if you do get a front trigger, your Shirayuki will have, like, 1 unit will have power. But if you get a front trigger when you swing your Shirayuki, suddenly everything costs 10 more to guard, and it's the same effect as doing another damage anyway, because they will have to drop more cards instead of getting 1 more damage straight away and getting the trigger, defensive trigger, to mitigate the effect of all your cards and mitigate the effect of Shirayuki skill, which essentially returns them to the original base power. So with the front trigger, not only do you have this whole front row getting the 10,000 power, it also reduces the thinking and the guessing when your opponent goes to the pass. You get a front trigger, front row, second check, you get a critical trigger, critical trigger, straight to your Vanguard. You can do 2 damage and the rest of your front row still gets that power, which is why I think this is one of the most important cards. One of the most important triggers to run are front triggers. But of course, people might disagree and think critical triggers are better for pushing the opponent. That's really up to you. But if you do run critical triggers, you probably want to give the power to your Tsuki Rocks, so that your opponent, when your whole front row is done hitting your Tsuki Rock, perhaps your opponent got 1 damage trigger, your Tsuki Rock is still relevant and able to hit. Because Tsuki Rock is the only card where if your opponent really gets a damage trigger at 18, he can't really hit if your opponent has gotten back, can't really hit hard if your opponent's back to 13 or 12k base. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's kind of my brainstorming that came up with these kind of strange ideas. Of course, you can just play a bunch of mandalas and get rid of this card completely, but I do enjoy this deck a lot, and this is probably the one deck I've been waiting for since the start of the V series. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. So if you like what you see and you want to see more, click that subscribe button and hit that bell notification icon to stay up to date for more of my videos. But until next time, have fun, and remember, it's okay to play casual.